Well, for more, let's cross to Johannesburg. Stephanie Wolters is Senior Research Fellow at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good evening.
Let's break this down because it's so much has happened so fast that it makes your head spin. First off, how did Felix Tshisekedi manage to turn all those parliamentarians?
Well, it's been a long time coming. I mean, it turns out with hindsight that we have now that he's really been working on this. There's been quite a clear strategy that he's been starting to put in place starting last year. And it, in many ways, took a very significant step when he managed to gain control of the judges of the Constitutional Court, an institution that always really supported many of the political decisions that Kabila made and kept him in office for 2 years longer than he was mandated to. And Tshisekedi managed to gain control of the Constitutional Court mid-2020. And with that, I think a lot of the people around Kabila, realized that Kabila no longer had the capacity to guarantee himself a return to office in 2023. And so already a very fractured political platform that Kabila had, then suddenly realizing that probably they wouldn't come back into power in 2023. And through a number of different moves that Tshisekedi has made over the last few months, he's managed to grab those political opportunists and create a whole new political platform called the Union Sacrée.
Back in December of 2018, did you think this would happen?
No, I think that back in December of 2018 and in the early part of 2019, when we were still waiting for the election results to come out, and then when we saw this political arrangement really that came out of those elections, because we do believe that Martin Fayulu won those elections, and then in fact Kabila offered the presidency to Tshisekedi and then kept for himself the majority, as you said in the introduction, in the National Assembly. It really looked like we were going to have two centers of power, with Tshisekedi decidedly weaker than the Kabila faction. But the problem with that setup was that inevitably these two were going to be rivals, and they were going to be going head to head on a number of different issues, and notably closer as we got closer and closer to the 2023 elections. So I think we've always expected that the relationship would be difficult, but this rather ingenious strategy coming from the Tshisekedi camp did take many of us by surprise.
All right, and we heard on Monday from the new prime minister. Let's take a listen.
Ça va demander que nous puissions appliquer avec le gouvernement qui va être formé des pratiques de bonne gouvernance à outrance, de rigueur, de lutte contre les antivaleurs et contre la fraude.
So, Stephanie Wolters, this talk of reform, of fighting corruption, those who watch Congo closely perhaps have with a bit of skepticism when they hear those words?
Absolutely. I think that we have to be very careful about celebrating what many see as a victory. I mean, considering everything that was Kabila as bad and everything that is Tshisekedi as good is really oversimplifying matters. What we have now with the Union Sacrée is a very large political platform with many transplants coming from the Kabila camp and really no consensus uniting these different political factions. So we have to see how they're going to coexist with one another, whether they're going to choose to cooperate and work for better governance and reform of some of the key institutions in the DRC. There's absolutely no guarantee at this point that that is where Tshisekedi intends to steer the country. It's certainly what he's telling everybody, but the proof will be in the reforms as we go forward in the battle against corruption, in the reform of the Independent Electoral Institute, and really the kind of tolerance for political expression and political freedoms that we haven't, unfortunately, seen in the DRC for the last several decades.
And what does it tell you, the fact that the stepping stone to being prime minister is head of the national mining company?
Yes, I mean, that is significant. Some people, of course, have seen that as a sign that this is a person who comes to the job with management experience, and he does, in fact, have, the new prime minister, a mining engineering degree and has spent time in the private sector. I think it does tell us also how much Tshisekedi trusts this individual, having put him at the head of Jekamin after many years of having somebody there who was a very key Kabila ally. So these two have had a relationship of trust for some time.
One final question for you, Stephanie Wolters. What happens to, are all of Kabila's men gone? I'm thinking perhaps most notably of the Israeli businessman Dan Gertler, who's heavily involved in the mining and oil sector. What happens to him?
Well, of course, Dan Gertler had been under sanctions in the U.S. Those were lifted at the end of the year, was one of the last things that the Trump administration did. But Dan Gertler has a whole new political elite that he has to win over with the Tshisekedi camp. And that will be another one of those things that we'll be watching closely, how Tshisekedi manages the mining sector, how he manages these relationships with some of the more corrupt characters coming from the Kabila regime.
Stephanie Wolters, many thanks for joining us from Johannesburg.
Thank you.
Stay with us. There's more to come here on France 24. More news plus the day's business and sports.